So now let's move from structural differences to functional differences. So now let's look at functional differences. We talked about the MRI and how that, the fMRI, how that allows us to look at direct observation of how the brain functions. What Schultz found in his study, he found that children, or adults, with ASD were using a part of brain that's usually reserved for non-face object recognition, and that the parts of brain that should be working together to process emotion on faces were not working together, which certainly suggests some of what we see, when children can either listen to our words or look at what our body's doing, but has trouble doing that together. Luna found that children with ASD, adults, with ASD, use lower regions of the brain rather than higher order neural systems. So they're using more object recognition kinds of neural systems rather than those in the upper level cortex that would allow for more efficient associations to be made. So this really connects with something that we've noticed, right? We know that hyperlexia is fairly common in children with autism. Hyperlexia meaning that they can read or decode even though they haven't been obviously taught or at a very young age, and that's, remember, separate from reading comprehension. And what Just and colleagues showed was that lower regions of the brain were used on sentence comprehension tasks, and found that people with autism remembered the letters of the alphabet more in the right side of their brain that ordinarily processes shapes rather than letters. So again, that kind of points to the fact that they're using lower cortical levels of the brain. The autism group had more activation than the control group in the posterior regions, including inferior temporal and occipital regions, and that distinct brain areas were working independently. So the people with autism were good at details but bad at conceiving a whole, which we know and we'll talk about quite a bit. So the parts of the brain are working but just not together, which really goes back to what we talked about the gray matter and the white matter. It's a matter of functional connectivity. It's not that the brain's not working, it's not integrating material at the same time or at the appropriate time, or sometimes not at all. So, people with autism often call us who have normal developing brains neurotypicals, and I've included a couple of websites for adults with autism who like to connect with each other and they problem solve together. If you go there, please respect the way they think is different than ours, and sometimes they'll even ask you to leave if you're too neurotypical. There are more immune system problems in children with autism, and we think there are people with genetic predispositions that lead to autoimmune disorders. Remember, autoimmune disorders are also on the rise. These individuals are more sensitive to toxic kinds of things in the environment, which affects the neurology of the fetus or the developing child. And we know this can happen because of rubella, maternal use of anti-seizure medication, food products, vaccines, heightened sensitivity to food products such as wheat and dairy. However, I have to say that research has not supported the fact that a gluten, casein-free diet is really effective with children with autism. First, there's been no studies whatsoever that show that this is a problem, and no studies, scientific studies, that show that the gluten casein-free has been effective in changing anything. There's one peer-reviewed study on the gluten casein-free diet, and that study was done where the dependent variable was parent report. So it was not done with blood work or anything else. It was a matter of interviewing the parents to see if they thought it helped.